In 2009, researchers at the University of Iowa took a woman to a haunted house. She had volunteered. The house was professional, theatrical, designed to frighten, actors in full monster costumes, strobe lights, fog machines, sudden drops and screams around every corner. She walked through calmly. At one point she stopped, leaned toward a costumed actor, and asked if she could touch the mask. She found the whole experience fascinating. Not frightening. Not even mildly unsettling. She was not suppressing fear. She was not being brave. She simply could not feel it. She was known in the scientific literature only as SM. To protect her privacy, her real name was never published. She was in her 40s. She had a husband, children, a life. She was intelligent, warm, and emotionally expressive in almost every way. She laughed easily. She felt sadness, happiness, disgust, surprise. But one emotional experience was simply not available to her. Not controlled. Not buried. Not managed. Simply absent, as completely as color is absent from a room with no light. She had a rare genetic condition called Urbach-Wiethe disease. Fewer than 300 people worldwide have ever been diagnosed. One of its effects, in some cases, is calcification of tissue in the temporal lobe. Calcium deposits form inside a specific, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain. In SM's case, the deposits had accumulated on both sides. Her amygdala had calcified completely. It had stopped working. And because it had stopped working, fear, the full biological experience of it, had gone with it. The amygdala is one of the most studied structures in all of neuroscience. It sits deep in the brain, part of the limbic system, the ancient emotional hardware that humans share with creatures far older than us. It is not the only region involved in fear, but it is the one most consistently tied to it. Damage the amygdala in rats, and they will walk calmly toward cats. Stimulate it electrically in humans, and they report sudden, inexplicable dread. It is the brain's threat detector. The alarm that fires before you consciously know what you have seen. SM had lived her entire adult life without this alarm. And the consequences were not what you might expect. She had not become fearless in a heroic sense. She had become exposed in ways that were quietly devastating. Over the course of her life, she had been held at knife point. She had walked alone at night through a park known locally to be dangerous. She had encountered situations that would send almost anyone running and had simply stood there, not because she was courageous, but because the signal that says run was simply never sent. Researchers led by Justin Feinstein at the University of Iowa began systematically testing what SM could and could not experience. They showed her horror films. The Shining. Silence of the Lambs. She watched with genuine interest. She could identify which moments were designed to be frightening, and explain why they worked on others. She found the psychology of horror intellectually engaging. But she did not flinch. Her hands stayed still in her lap. Her breathing did not change. She was watching a documentary about an emotion she had heard of but never visited. They took her to an exotic pet store. SM had told the researchers she disliked snakes. She found them repulsive, she said. She did not want to go near them. And then she walked into the store and could not stop reaching for the snakes. She kept extending her hand toward them. The researchers had to intervene. She knew she had said she disliked snakes. She found this curious about herself. She could state a preference. She could not feel the aversion that was supposed to back it up. Fear has a second job, beyond the immediate alarm. It is a memory stamp. When something frightens you, the experience is encoded deeply, vividly, with a weight that other memories do not carry. This is why you can recall exactly where you were during the most frightening moment of your life, while yesterday's lunch is already gone. The amygdala burns the experience in. SM had no such stamp. She could remember events. But the visceral brand that fear leaves on a dangerous memory, the brand that says do not go back, simply did not form. Back in the haunted house. The other participants were grabbing each other, shrieking, pressing against the walls. SM was walking at an even pace through each room, looking around with interest. An actor in a full monster costume jumped directly in front of her face. Everyone around her screamed. SM leaned forward. She wanted a closer look. She was curious about the costume detail. The researcher accompanying her noted something precise. SM was not suppressing a flinch. There was no tension in her body, no reflexive bracing. The system had received no signal to suppress. Here is what fear actually is, neurologically. It is a prediction. The amygdala compares what you are currently experiencing against stored templates of past threats. When it finds a match, a sound that resembles danger, a face that carries menace, a situation that echoes something that once caused harm, it fires. It fires before your conscious mind has caught up. Your body responds first. Your heart rate climbs, your muscles tense, your attention narrows. The mind follows after. SM's pattern matching system had no stored alarm. The comparison ran. Nothing was returned. What made SM remarkable to the researchers was not just what she could not feel. It was what she could. She understood fear. She could define it precisely. She had watched others experience it. She could reason accurately about situations that warranted it. She just had no access to the experience itself. This distinction, between knowing about an emotion and actually having it, is one of the most important in all of psychology. Emotional knowledge and emotional experience run on different systems. SM had one fully functioning. The other had been quietly removed. Over years of careful study, the researchers built a picture of what a life without amygdala fear actually looks like. SM had stayed in situations most people would have left. Not because she lacked the reasoning to identify harm, she did not lack it, but because the involuntary urgency that makes threatened creatures flee was absent. The background wariness that guards most people through daily life, in crowds, in unfamiliar places, with strangers, was simply not running. She navigated the world without the system that evolution spent millions of years building to keep her in it. And then the researchers tried something they had not expected to try. They gave SM carbon dioxide to inhale. Concentrated CO2 triggers a panic response, but not through the amygdala. It works through a separate pathway, a brainstem circuit that monitors the chemistry of breathing. When CO2 rises in the blood, it signals directly that suffocation is occurring. When SM inhaled it, something happened that stopped the researchers. She panicked. She grabbed the arm of the person beside her. She reported terror. Intense, sudden, physical. For the first time in a controlled setting, SM was afraid. This was one of the most significant findings in the history of fear research. It proved that there are at least two separate fear systems in the human brain. One is amygdala-based. It responds to external threats in the environment, a predator, a weapon, a face that signals danger. The other is brainstem-based. It responds to internal physiological threat, suffocation, loss of bodily control. SM had lost the first system entirely. The second was completely intact. Fear was not one thing. It was an architecture, and she had lost part of it. The discovery reshaped how neuroscientists understand anxiety and fear-related disorders. PTSD, phobias, panic disorder, all of them involve the amygdala-based system misfiring. It fires in response to things that are not genuinely threatening. It treats the environment as more dangerous than it is. SM showed researchers the opposite, a world with no environmental threat detection at all. And the view from that world was not freedom. It was constant, unguarded exposure to everything her brain could not be taught to fear. Fear is not a design flaw. This is the lesson that SM's case makes impossible to ignore. It is not a weakness. It is not a sign of fragility. It is information. The amygdala exists because the world contains things that can harm you, and the system that notices them before your conscious mind catches up is the thing that kept every one of your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. To live without it is not to live bravely. It is to live without the guard at the door ever sounding the alarm. SM could not choose to feel fear. But you can choose what you do with yours. The research shows that the fear response fires automatically. The body reacts before you decide anything. But the response to the response, what happens in the seconds after the alarm sounds, is not automatic. That is where agency lives. SM had no alarm. Many people have an alarm that fires too often, in situations that do not warrant it. But the alarm is not the problem. The question is what you build around it. Late in the studies, SM was asked what it had been like to feel fear, even briefly, during the CO2 experiment. She said it was overwhelming. She was not sure she liked it. She had no prior experience to calibrate it against, no lifetime of small frights that had given her a sense of proportion. One hit of genuine fear, full and sudden, and it was deeply unpleasant. This is worth holding. Fear feels bad. But SM's life without it was not better. It was more dangerous. More exposed. More vulnerable in ways she had no tool to recognize or prevent. The lesson from SM is not that you should feel less fear. The lesson is that fear is not your enemy. It is data. What you are afraid of tells you something about what you value. The instinctive recoil from danger is the body's signal that something matters. The fear of losing someone is evidence that you love them. The fear of failure is evidence that the goal is real to you. The signal itself is not the problem. The problem is when we confuse the alarm for a verdict rather than reading it as information. In 2009, SM walked out of the haunted house curious and unshaken. The researchers walked out knowing something that would take years to fully understand. That fear is not one system. That it evolved for a reason. That without it, the world does not become easier to navigate. It becomes harder. You have an amygdala. It fires. It was built over millions of years to fire. The question was never whether you should feel fear. The question is what you do in the moment after it arrives.